All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for our fifth Get in the G Suite Groove webinar. Today is all about Google Forms. My name's Nick. I'll be leading today's session, like the last few that I've led. And again, I want to stay at the top. Thanks for joining us. I know taking a half hour out of your week's not easy right now, so we're going to try to make this as useful as possible. Hopefully, you all are excited to learn a little bit more about Google Forms. We always got to start with just a quick disclaimer about Google Meet, because that's what we're using. So you all have done an excellent job the past few weeks of this, but just reminder to stay muted throughout today's session. If you do have questions, that's great. We encourage questions. Just click chat and you can type your question in. And then, of course, we'll have some time at the end for me to go through questions. I'll ask for your feedback or your questions in a form as well. So you'll get some actual live form use today as well. So hopefully that sounds good. Nothing's new there. Let's dive right into just a couple session goals, and then like all of our other webinars, it's all about live demo today. So this just continues our theme of, this is a new world for everyone, and we're trying to make sure that all of our customers and clients feel good about actually feeling more at work while working from home. So we are encouraging everyone to start using Google Forms. And that's what today is all about. How can you use Google Forms in this new working environment? And I think Google Forms, it might seem like a stretch. Some folks might not even come today, right? Like, why would I use Google Forms when I'm not working in the office anymore? What's the use case? So we'll try to really hit on that in a few different ways. And I'll try to make sure that you feel comfortable with different ways you could use Google Forms starting today. And the other thing to think about, and today is, it's a 30-minute webinar. It's not really a full-blown training. And Forms, unlike tasks or Keep, is multiple layers to it. And I want you to feel pretty comfortable after you leave today with resources for where you can go to get help going forward. So with that in mind, through chat, I'm just going to share a link. Don't spend any time reading it right now. But this is the G Suite Learning Center link for Forms. So information on, how do you start using Forms? How can you create a survey or a quiz using Forms? How do you send it? What are some options within Forms? We'll try to cover most of that today, but again, it's a deep tool. It's an application that has a lot of abilities within it. So I want to make sure you have some resources once you leave today. And with that in mind, let's dive in. So Forms is another tool that lives in your Google Drive. And Google Drive, I love Google Drive. We talked about it a few weeks ago. There's so much within Google Drive that assists in collaboration and assists in an environment like this where you're no longer sitting next to your colleagues. And I think Forms is another one of those. So the way to start a new form, pretty easy. You probably already guessed it. You're going to look for your new button. And then I don't know why Google hit it, because it's probably my favorite tool, but under this More section here, just look for Forms. And like everything else, or like most everything else in Google Drive, there are templates available. We're not going to use those today. But if you're just looking to scale up a quick survey for your employees or a quick quiz to ask employees how using Google Meet's going day to day, you could certainly leverage one of these templates, adjust it slightly for your use case, and then dive in from there. But I want you to get the full picture of it, so we're going to use a blank form. So I'm going to click on that. You know what's going to do next. It's just going to create a new, in this case, Google form. Like everything else in Google Drive, everything saves automatically. It's built for collaboration. So you need to name it right away. So don't start with an untitled form, create 50 questions, leave it, come back a week later and wonder where that is living. Definitely name it and maybe even organize it into a folder right away. So for our purposes today, we're just going to do a quick survey. And you all are actually going to take this survey at the end of our time together. So we'll just call it Remote Work Survey. You're going to notice I name it up there, but it's going to bring that title over here. Pretty straightforward right there. Now, I always pause here. I always pause. This is the first time I've run this webinar. I'll pause here and I'll say, you're looking at this screen, you're saying this looks nothing like what I was picturing, or yeah, this kind of looks familiar. You all, if you're in this webinar today, have used a form. You filled out a form to register for today's webinar. If you gave us feedback last week, or I'm going to ask you again this week for feedback, if you filled that feedback out, you used a form. You've probably used forms for Google webinars or other trainings you may have attended. If you have kids in school, they probably use forms throughout the day too. So forms is a pretty common tool. It's just how do you use that today in an environment like this? So one quick use case beyond just a remote work survey for your employees is something that we do at Agosto. We're running weekly all company meetings, just a quick check-in that involves the entire company. And as part of that, we have an anonymous form that any employee can write their question in. There could be a million questions that you might not want to ask in a Google Meet in front of all your colleagues, but you might want an answer to that other folks might too. So our leadership has this form available to us that we can just type a question in at any point. It's totally anonymous. And we can get those questions answered weekly as well. Especially in a time like this, that's huge, right? I think there's a lot of unknowns or just a lot of things changing week to week. So to get a platform like that is a great, I think, tool. And I'll show you towards the end of today how our leaders are collecting those questions in a pretty cool way also. So that's another way that you could start leveraging forms today. But let's go back to this form. Let's get some questions in here because that's probably what you're here for. How do you use forms? So underneath remote work survey, we could add a description. You know, I promise you I'm not the worst typer. It's just when I'm talking and typing. Chrome to your advantage. And then we'll add our first question. So by default, it's just going to be a multiple choice question. I'll show you in a little bit where you can change that, but let's just use this first question to say, have you set up a home office? You guys are going to get tired of me typing in this session. I apologize up front for that. So I asked the question. I'm going to stick with multiple choice, but on the right side here, this is where you could certainly select different options or for question types. We'll see a couple more in a second here. And then below that, this is where you, if you need to, enter your answers. Google's pretty smart, right? They use a lot of machine learning. There's a lot built into their tools. So you can see here, I could just grab their answers, yes, no, or I could even say add other, and someone could put in, you know, ordered a desk, haven't gotten it yet, something like that. So we have our first question. I don't need to click save. I don't need to do anything else. I can click over here on the right side. I'm going to see some options here. Again, I left you with some resources, but the one we're going to focus on right now, I'm going to add another question. I want to scale this up really quickly just to show you how quick it can be. So don't get hung up on all the other options. There are a lot in there, but there's a few that are key that we'll cover today. So have you set up home office? Yes, no, or other. What if we want an option for multiple select, where instead of just one answer, they can choose multiple answers? Over here, we could say check boxes for that. And then we could ask them, you know, what supplies do you need? Okay, we got a few options here, maybe a second monitor. I think that's always a good option. Webcam. Click on this, plants. And we can just put add other and they can fill it out again, just like before. So now this one, unlike multiple choice, we're giving them multiple select options. Let's add another one really quickly here. So I want to get a sense for my employees' comfort level with coming back to the office. So when we are able to come back to the office, what's going to be their comfort level with that, just to get a sense for how we'll need to adjust in that environment as well. So we can ask that using a linear scale. So I can go here and I can say linear scale for question. Or I could say, instead of how comfortable, maybe I'll say how likely. Return. And we can say 1 is not at all likely. Something like this. You get the idea. And one more question down here. Let's just show you that you can also do free-form paragraphs or short answers, right? So maybe the last question is just describe any issues. Okay, so we have 4 questions really quickly. You can see that we have 4 different question types. It's not difficult at all to create those questions or change the question types. At this point, I could send this out right now. But there's a few other steps I always want you to take when you're thinking about using a form that are going to help you secure it or help you collaborate with others within it, or just make it look a little bit more personalized. So first and foremost, like all of your other G Suite tools, this is built from the ground up to be collaborative in nature, right? So if I want someone else to help me edit this, if I want my marketing team, who's always helping me with forms, to add a great logo into it, I can go up here to our menu. Everything in G Suite menu-wise is going to be those 3 dots in a vertical arrangement. So in the upper right-hand corner, we look for that. We'll just say add collaborators. So we're not looking for a share button in this case. We're looking for add collaborators. And then I can, I'll just add Jim. Jim's pretty good with logos. Add him in. I could even send a note to him through chat and just say, hey, Jim, take a look at this form and add a quick logo in there. So now Jim can collaborate in here. I'll be able to see if he joins. I'll see when he joins. I can see all the changes he's made, and all the changes will save automatically. So all those great things you love about Drive are going to translate right into Forms. So we're good there. We got a collaborator. Jim's going to take care of some things within it. The other spot to check within Forms is the gear. And you know, in G Suite, the gear is settings. So you click on the gear here, and it's going to take you right into form settings. Each form will have different settings. So always make sure you're checking this. Couple things to note right up front. First, do you want to collect email addresses? If it's an anonymous form, probably not. If it's not anonymous, for instance, if you're getting registrations for a webinar, like we do with you, we collect email addresses within that. Right here, this is on by default for most folks. This is restricting it to your domain. This is always something to pay attention to. I'm going to uncheck it for our webinar today because I'm going to send this to all of you. But if you were just limiting it to your colleagues, you'd want to leave that checked in. A couple other things. Presentation is here. If it's a longer survey, you can show a progress bar. If it's a quiz, maybe you want to shuffle the question order. You always probably want to have some sort of confirmation message. Now, this is the canned one. It's just going to say your response has been recorded. That's what they're going to see when they're done filling this out. Let's make that a little better. I got something quick here that I can just pop in there. You can even put in links within there that they could click on once they're done filling it out. So I got a quick confirmation message. Thanks for your input. Please explore this link for more resources. And our last tab within settings is just quizzes. We're not going to flip this on today. But when you think about this new work environment, you're thinking about probably lighting up new tools for your employees. If you're in IT right now, you're probably thinking about how am I going to get, 2,000 people or even 200 people comfortable with using Google Meet or Google Chat. What you could do is just do a quick quiz. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be hard. Just 2 questions around, hey, have you started using Google Meet? What are your roadblocks to using Google Meet today? Something like that. So quiz just gives you that flexibility to grade answers. I guess my example was not a good example, but you could have a quiz as well within Forms that's going to automatically score things for you. So, and in this new working environment, when again, you do have new tools you're rolling out to folks, getting some level of competence around those tools could be a good idea. So something to think about there. We're not going to do that right now. Whatever settings you change, just click Save at the bottom, and it'll save all those setting changes. The last thing I'll show you briefly here, right here, you can customize the theme. You've probably noticed we use great logos from my marketing department, but if you don't have a marketing department dedicated to you, just grab one of the images that Google has here already. It just makes it a little bit more professional and gives you maybe a little bit more professional look on it at the end. So I got a nice photo. I got a theme color. The last thing I'm going to do is click this preview button right here. This preview button is just going to show me that I can see the entire quiz as my end user would see it. So my colleagues would see it, or folks registering for a webinar would see it. And so I could even take it right now just to test it out. I'm not going to do that though. So let's go back into our editing mode over here. And let's talk about how we can actually send this now. So everything looks good. I got a few different questions within there. I'm going to really hopefully get some good data from this, but I need to get this in front of my colleagues to find out how they're doing in this new working environment. I'm going to click the send button right here. Now don't panic, it's not going to actually send it. It's going to present you with the options for actually getting this survey in front of people. There's three options or three main options within forms. So it's pretty extensible. The first one here in the far right is the one that we won't be using today. But if you have an intranet and you're looking to collect data or impact surveys or quizzes from folks, you could post it right on your intranet with this embed HTML. You can choose the height and width of it too. So depending on how big your homepage is, do you want it to be just a small widget or take up the whole homepage? You can do that right from here. You can also create a link. Now, a link is what we've been using with you all, right? So we have a link that you click on that takes you to the form, you fill out the form, and you're done. This works really well. This is what I'll use in a little bit with you all. But you do also have this option of sending it right from here in an email. So if I want to email this to a group of folks at my company, great. I can set the group email right here. I can adjust the subject or at least just leave it. I can add in a message that I want, and I can even include the form in the email. So a few different options for you there. I can't tell you what's right or wrong, but you know how to engage your employees probably better than I ever would. So explore all those options and kind of get a feel for it when you're thinking about sending it out. For us today, I'm going to go back to link here. We can actually click shorten URL, and we'll use this link in a moment here. Now, when I send this out, I'm going to want to see the results, right? I want to see the responses. Do you all have a home office? What supplies would help your home office work better? Where am I going to see those responses? Well, in Forms, you can get the responses right in Forms right here. I can even set it up so that if I click the menu here, I get an email notification every time someone fills that form out. Once I've collected all the responses, I can even download those responses in a CSV. And at any point, if I'm one of the editors of this form, I can click this button right here and stop accepting responses for whatever reason. Maybe the webinar's started and we want to stop accepting responses. Great. We can turn it off right there. So some flexibility within there. But for those of you who joined previous webinars in the past few weeks, you know that what I love about G Suite is, this ability to tie in other tools. So a lot of the G Suite tools work together really well. And Forms happens to have a great partner in Google Sheets. So I can actually link a Google Sheet into this. And instead of just getting responses in Google Forms, I can have those responses come in to a Google Sheet where I could create a pivot table or create a chart right in Google Sheets without moving the data or downloading the data and then uploading it again. So that's what I like to do. I encourage everyone else to do that as well. So since that's what I like to do, and we got a few minutes, let's walk through that process right now. The first thing I'm going to recommend is if you're going to do that, organize this form into a folder. And that's super easy. Just click the folder button right here. Create a new folder even, right? And we'll just call this one Remote Work Survey. Check. Click move here. It'll move that in the background. I don't need to go back into my drive to click and drag it. It's going to move that into that new folder. And then the next step is just simply clicking right here. This little green icon is Google Sheets. Why did I put my form into a folder? Because then the sheet will go into that same folder as well. So I don't have two loose files in my drive. I'll just click Create New Spreadsheet. It's going to churn for a moment, and then it's going to create a spreadsheet that's going to live capture the results from this form. Before I send that form out, the last thing I like to do is a minimal amount of editing within this sheet. So maybe the top row, you can see they've frozen the top row, but bold it and just do a little text wrapping so you can actually see what questions you were asking. So now when results come in, I kept it anonymous. I'm going to get a timestamp, and then I'm going to see answers for the 4 questions I asked. That's pretty simple. Now I want to do this live, and I want you all to see how cool this is. So I'm going to go back into here. I'm going to go back to my send button. I'm going to grab that short URL. And if even some of you are willing to do this, we'll get to see what this looks like. I'm going to send that link through chat. I'll actually fill it out also, but just take 20 seconds, click on that link, and fill out that survey, and then we'll actually see those results pop into this sheet here. I guess if my internet works, because that form's not loading for me. Okay, we got someone filling it out. Someone who likes me. More plants. That's right. So you've set up a home office. You want a second, or maybe you want more plants like me. And we can see those responses come in immediately. So thank you for those of you who did fill that out. I think that gives you a good sense of how quick it is to get those responses. Now, okay, so we have this form. We're getting responses. We have this sheet that's pulling in the responses automatically and immediately, right? I didn't do much within this sheet around actually formatting it, but I did a little bit to make sure I could see the results. The next thing I'm going to show you is not related to forms at all, but something that I love. Within Sheets, whenever you get a large data set, just highlight it. Highlight your data set, use your mouse, unlike me, and click this little button, Explore, down here. One of the coolest things about G Suite is that it'll do the work for you, right? So I always get the question of like, okay, I have this huge data set, but I don't know how to look at it. If you use an Explore tab, oftentimes it'll give you results from that data set. Now, it's not giving me much here, but I can quickly maybe organize it. Okay. Count of what supplies you need to be more efficient from working at home. Just like that, it creates a chart for me. And we can see that more plants tends to be the most common answer, right? So 4 folks have said more plants. Now, if it was 400 results, and this table was created for me, it'd be far easier. But you can also use just this right here to say, I want to know the average of how likely are my employees to return to work in 3 months. I can get that average. I'm getting more results coming in here. See, someone says not enough bandwidth. That's a great answer. I can even click and drag that average down here. So I can make Sheets work for me using that Explore tab. And especially with large data sets, and if you tailor the questions, if you have free-form answers, it tends to be a little tougher to collect, results within those answers. But even this right here, we could get a sense of people want more plants. And, I'd say it's maybe halfway likely that folks will return to the office in the next 3 months. So just quickly, we're able to get that data without a lot of legwork on our end. And again, Sheets will allow us to leverage that. If I was better at Sheets, I'd create a pivot table right now. I know I have someone on the call who likes pivot tables. So if I was better at that, I could quickly pop a pivot table in here as well and just take that data to the next level. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how we use forms day to day, how we collect that data within forms to plug it into Sheets. And hopefully it gives you something that you can start using forms, whether it's an anonymous form as you think about how are your employees doing today, or maybe it's specific forms about why are people not using Meet today? How can we get people to use Meet? Or why are people not using chat today? Or what are people struggling with in this new remote working environment? This is a tool that you can use today to get some of those answers. I want to leave some time for questions because it is such an extensible tool. So I'm going to hop back in to our slide deck here and close it out as we always do with first thanking you for coming. We want to keep doing these. We hope you are getting something from these each week. You're joining the ones that you think will be useful. We appreciate that. I do want some suggestions and feedback from you if you have 2 minutes. It'll show you another form too. So I'm going to share that link through chat. If you have 2 minutes, go ahead and fill that out. Let us know what you'd like to see later on, or let us know the feedback from today's session or the previous sessions. And then of course, as usual, if you have questions about forms or Sheets, I might not have answers for Sheets, but if you have questions about forms and Sheets, chat's open right now. Feel free to type your question in and I'll stick around and answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, keep paying attention to your email. We will see you next week for our next Get in the G Suite Groove, where we're going to cover all things Gmail and how to leverage Gmail in this working environment. Thanks, everyone. If you don't have questions, you all are free to go. Yeah, great question. Can you group questions together? You can. So if I go back to this form here, pretty short form, right? So we didn't need to really group questions together, but it's called a section, and it's right here. So if I go down to the bottom here, I can add a new section. And so I could have each section have a theme or a group of questions underneath that section. You can even add descriptions for those sections. And as an end user, when you're looking at that survey or form, they'll see it as a new page. So they'll click at the bottom, next page or next section, I think it says. It'll take them to that next section. So you can group questions together. Does that answer the question? Awesome. Great question. All right, I'll end the recording now, but don't feel like you can't ask questions after I end that recording.